What really happened to Ry in The Last Sunrise? Her ending explained. Hello everyone. Today we're going to explain exactly what happened to Ry in The Last Sunrise, including her medical crisis, the surgery, what happens to her memories, and what that final scene with Julian really means. Before we continue, here's your spoiler alert. We're going through the entire ending, so if you haven't watched the movie yet, this is your warning. So, what really happened to Ry? At the beginning of the movie, Ry is already living with a serious medical condition. She has tuberous sclerosis, which causes seizures, and doctors have given her two major options. She can control the condition with medication, or she can undergo surgery to remove the tumors causing her seizures. The problem is that the surgery carries a frightening risk. It could affect her memory. For Ry, that possibility is almost as scary as the illness itself. She doesn't want to survive while losing the memories that make her who she is. So she chooses medication instead. But there's a major problem with that decision. Ry hates how the medication makes her feel. She feels numb. She doesn't feel completely connected to the world around her. And when she arrives in Mallorca with her mother, she decides to stop taking the medication because she wants to experience life differently. That's when Julian enters her life. Ry meets Julian on the beach, and the two quickly develop a strong connection. For the first time in a long time, Ry feels completely alive. She explores Mallorca with Julian, experiences new things, and begins falling in love with him. But she's hiding something extremely important. She hasn't told Julian how serious her medical condition really is. And eventually, that secret catches up with her. Ry suffers another seizure and ends up in serious danger. After this, Julian finally learns the truth. He discovers that Ry isn't simply dealing with occasional health problems. Her condition could become life-threatening. And that's when the movie starts moving toward its emotional climax. Ry eventually meets Julian at the beach and explains why she has been so afraid of surgery. She's terrified that if she undergoes the operation, she might wake up without the memories of the summer they shared. For Ry, that would mean potentially losing Julian even if she survives. But then something much worse happens. Ry loses consciousness while she's with Julian. Her condition has become too serious. Doctors now believe that surgery is necessary. There is no longer time for Ry to keep avoiding the decision. And this is where Julian makes one of the most important choices in the movie. He convinces Ry's mother, Isolde, to allow the surgery. That might sound strange because Ry had clearly expressed that she didn't want it. But Julian understands something that becomes central to the ending. He would rather have Ry alive with uncertain memories than lose her completely. He tells Isolde that Ry's favorite memories can still be the ones ahead of her. And that's really the turning point. The surgery goes ahead, and the biggest question becomes whether Ry will survive. The answer is yes. Ry does not die in The Last Sunrise. The surgery is successful, and Ry wakes up in the hospital. But surviving isn't the end of the story, because now we have the other question. Does Ry remember Julian? This is where the movie deliberately becomes ambiguous. Julian enters Ry's hospital room after the surgery. He says her name. Ry looks at him. But before we can clearly understand her reaction, the movie cuts away. And that's important. The filmmakers could have shown Ry immediately recognizing Julian. They could have shown her saying his name. They could have given us a clear emotional reunion. Instead, they leave us wondering, did she forget him? Or is she remembering? The answer becomes clearer in the next sequence. We see Ry swimming at the beach, and we hear her voiceover. She explains that her memories are coming back to her one by one. That's probably the biggest clue in the entire ending. It suggests that her memories aren't simply gone forever. They're returning gradually. She remembers pieces of her past. She remembers someone she used to know. And then Julian appears. He approaches her and introduces himself. "Hola, I'm Julian." And that's where the movie ends. So what does this mean? The simplest interpretation is that Ry has temporarily lost her memories of Julian. The surgery affected her memory, and she doesn't immediately recognize the person standing in front of her. But there's another possibility. She may already remember him, Or she may be in the process of remembering him. The movie intentionally doesn't confirm which interpretation is correct. Director Carlson Young and the cast have discussed the ambiguity surrounding the ending, and Maya Rafiko revealed that several different endings were filmed. That's why we shouldn't treat Julian's introduction as absolute proof that Ry has completely forgotten him. It could be literal, or it could be symbolic. And the symbolic interpretation is actually very interesting. Think about how Ry and Julian first met. They were strangers. They didn't know each other. They didn't know that their meeting would change their lives. Now, after everything they've experienced, Julian approaches Ry and introduces himself again. It's almost like he's giving their relationship a second beginning. And if Ry's memories are returning, this meeting could even become the trigger that helps her remember him. The beach itself is also important. The movie connects the final beach sequence with the beginning of Ry's story. The Cinemaholic notes that the beach scene is essentially a recreation of their first meeting, while Ry's narration about her memories returning suggests that the entire story may be connected to the process of remembering her summer with Julian. So the ending can be read almost like a loop. Ry meets Julian. She falls in love with him. She risks losing those memories. She survives. And then she meets Julian again. But this time, they have the possibility of starting over with everything they've already experienced between them. That's what makes the ending emotional rather than tragic. Ry doesn't get a perfect ending. She doesn't wake up with every problem magically solved. Her illness hasn't simply disappeared. Her future still involves medical treatment and uncertainty. But she's alive, and she has another opportunity to live. That's a major change from the way Ry viewed her life earlier in the movie. Before Mallorca, Ry was constantly thinking about what she might lose. She was afraid of surgery. She was afraid of her illness. She was afraid of losing her memories. And because she was so focused on those fears, she started treating every beautiful moment like it might be her last. That's where the title, The Last Sunrise, becomes important. At first, the sunrise feels like a symbol of an ending. Ry doesn't know how many more mornings she has left. But by the end, that meaning completely changes. The sunrise isn't necessarily her last. It's a new beginning. Ry survives the surgery, but more importantly, she begins looking at life differently. Earlier, she believes avoiding risk will protect her. Eventually, she realizes that avoiding every risk can also mean avoiding life itself. And Julian understands that. Even if Ry doesn't immediately remember him, he doesn't walk away. He stays, introduces himself again, and gives her the chance to discover him all over again. If she remembers him, they can continue their story. If she doesn't, they can create new memories together. That's why the ending doesn't need a definite answer. The movie wants us to imagine what happens next. Maybe Ry remembers Julian gradually. Maybe something triggers those memories. Or maybe she truly has to fall in love with him again. But one thing is certain, Ry survives. Her story doesn't end in the hospital. The final sunrise represents a second chance. She has more time, more memories to create, and possibly more memories to recover. And Julian is still there. She didn't reach her last sunrise. She reached